I'll have to admit, it has been quite some time since I purposefully tried to annoy a good portion of my audience by leading off with images like this from the beaches in Florida. I remember the first time that I used these images, it was for a completely different reason, and I found it very odd, the vitriol, the anger that I got down in the comments section, people saying I can't possibly be a Christian, no moral standing. They couldn't necessarily pick out a scripture that said just the image of the human body itself was immoral, but they would throw out the word modesty like some kind of club and hope that they swung and hit something, usually failing. Now, why am I leading off with it today? Well, there is a parallel. There is something in common that happened in this country that happened over in Israel some years ago that puts this all together. Now, let me ask you a question. Would you be for some type of a morality militia patrolling up and down the beaches in Florida or anywhere else for that matter? And if they saw something they didn't think was quite in line with what they perceived to be biblical teaching, having the ability to go up and harass people. You see, we had that in this country, believe it or not. And yesterday, later in the video, I think some people missed it, I showed how Hamas, when they got elected in Palestine, you remember Palestine, the open-air prison that has elections and beaches and the ability to travel to Lebanon and take paraglider training from Germans and the ability to travel to Texas and learn how to shoot and kill Jews better from Texas patriots. You know that open-air prison, Palestine? Well, you see, they had that group of people, too, that wanted to roll up and down the beaches in Gaza City. That's right, Gaza City has beaches. And decide to tell other people how they should and should not behave. I'm going to share that with you guys today. I know that probably shocks a lot of people because they don't get it reported to them in their silo of media that they have chosen for themselves. But this is actually the case. It's the lie about the open air prison and evil Zionism and all this kind of stuff. So real quick, before we get into it, I'm going to read the article for you and show you guys. But biblical value number 1, gratitude. Give thanks. And you guys coming through in spades, God bless every one of you that show up, not only here, but over at the Florida Maquis Patreon channel. $1 a month, $5 a month, whatever level you're at, God bless you. You're making a huge difference in my life. You have no idea. I don't know that I would still be able to do this full time, put videos out every single day, and do videos over at Patreon if it wasn't for you guys. Would love to have you over there. If it's not for you, if you decide, you know what, I'm going to give it a chance. It's only $1. I'm going to give it a chance. You've got 3 months. You've got the month you sign up, and then you got 2 more on top of that. And if by that time it's not for you, you go over there and like, yeah, the videos are different, but they're just not for me. You can say, hey, Florida Maquis, I'd like my $3 back. God bless what you're doing, but just not for me. No problem. 90 days to kick the tires. Would love to have you over there. And that applies both at the $1 level, $5 level. Doesn't matter. So God bless all of you. Thank you so much for doing it. Vimeo gives us the ability to do different videos over there. We can take the gloves off. We can put up some speed bumps that keep the censors away. Now, Mr. Trump said something that was, I think what they refer to in the modern vernacular is OG, original gangster. Has anybody noticed? We had the second tranche of hostages being released from Israel today. And he said, has anybody noticed that Hamas has returned people from other countries, but so far has not returned one American hostage? There is only one reason for that: no respect for our country or our leadership. This is a very sad and dark period of America. Now, the reason I say this is original gangster is because some people would say, well, a hostage is a hostage. It should be children and women and the elderly, and nationality shouldn't matter. I can partially agree with that, but there's also the idea that you can't let thugs like Hamas, because of poor Palestine, that whole argument, think that they can just do whatever the hell they want. There's not going to be consequences. See, if it was your wife, sister, niece, cousin, mom at the beach, and somebody came up and started harassing them and yelling at them and calling them names and denigrating them because of how they were dressed. You see, if that happened here in Florida, it would be on like Donkey Kong if we heard about that from one of our female loved ones, relatives, friends, whoever. We'd go find whoever that was, and that would be the end of their time on the beach. Anywhere. Period. We'd have a... Now, some might say, well, what if Cuba has a really conservative group of people that are in charge, and, they really don't like America. That blockade, mean old America, blockade on Cuba. What if they came over and they did to us what Hamas decided to do to Israel? You see, some said, well, it's the fault of this and that, the other. This article I'm going to read for you guys is from, ready for this? 14 years ago. You see, believe it or not, Hamas won an election. See, that's what you should all ask anybody out there saying, oh, poor Gaza, poor Palestine. They elected these people. They elected Hamas. And they gave them an inch and they took a mile. And this proves it. Hamas patrols beaches in Gaza to enforce conservative dress code. Lawyers resist campaign to make Palestinian society more Islamist. How has that worked out 14 years later? And here are the guys on horseback, wearing all black. A mounted Hamas officer rides along the beach at Gaza City on the lookout for infringements of Islamic dress codes. See this open-air prison here? The giant open-air prison where people were going to the beach and running around, splashing in the waves. I'm going to read this for you guys, and I don't normally read long articles like this, but I think this one bears reading so that you can hear it for yourself. It began with a rash of unusually assertive police patrols. Armed Hamas officers stopped men from sitting shirtless on the beach, broke up groups of unmarried men and women, and ordered shopkeepers not to display lingerie on mannequins in their windows. Then came an effort to force female lawyers to abide by a more conservative dress code and intense pressure on parents to dress their daughters more conservatively for the new school term. Last week, police began enforcing a new decree banning women from riding on motorbikes. See, none of this is Israel. None of this is Israel. This is all Hamas, the Palestinian Authority. For the first time since Hamas won Palestinian parliamentary elections nearly 4 years ago, so now we're going back 18 years, the group is trying to Islamize Gazan society, and now we can see 14 years later they have. In public, Hamas leaders say they are merely encouraging a social moral code and insist they're not trying to imitate the religious police who operate in some other rigid Islamic countries. But to many, it feels like a new wave of enforcement in what is already a devoutly Muslim society. Asma al-Ghul, a writer and former journalist, was one of the first to run up against the new campaign. She spent an evening with a mixed group of friends in a beachside cafe in late June. After dark, she and another female friend went swimming wearing, oh, the horror, long trousers and t-shirts. Moments after leaving the water, they found themselves confronted by a group of increasingly aggressive Hamas police officers. Quote, "Where's your father? Your husband?" One officer asked her. Ghul, 27, was told her behavior had not been respectable. 5 of her male friends were beaten and detained for several hours. Quote, "Well, I believe our society is secular, but some Islamic parties want to change the idea of this society to make it religious." Nah. Really? Really? Gosh, it seems like everywhere Islam goes, they are just picked on. The poor Islamists, they're just so misrepresented. She said she does not wear a headscarf, a choice that is increasingly rare for women in Gaza, and generally confined only to those living in the wealthier areas of Gaza City. She routinely suffers taunts from other Palestinians as she walks from her home to her favorite coffee shops. Quote, "We're just afraid to be ourselves in the street," she said. Hamas uses Islam in the mosque to try and control people's hearts. Now remember, what I'm reading here was written 14 years ago. Gazan society has become markedly more conservative over the last decade. In part, that is down to the growing influence of Islamist movements such as Hamas and others that hold even more extremist views. Palestinians here also blame Israel's tough economic blockade. What does that have to do with anything? Which they say has prevented a free flow of ideas and debate and largely stopped Gazans traveling abroad. Okay, let me ask a question here. Do the Israelis stop the free flow of ideas in Saudi Arabia? Do the Israelis stop the free flow of ideas in Iran, Afghanistan, or anywhere else Islam finds itself in charge in the government? No. In those countries, they beat women, they stone women, they behead people, they cut off hands. You see, this is the questions they don't ask. Stopped Gazans from traveling abroad. We just showed a week ago, wish I'd have brought the picture, of the Gazan, the Palestinian, the Jordanian national that was in Texas taking gun training, and all of those guys flying those paragliders. They got the training up in Lebanon. Patriot Nurse reported that from a German. Violence in the conflict, they say, tends to allow conservatism to flourish. Hamas leaders insist there's no compulsion in their new campaign. Quote, the main tool of the campaign is awareness and education without interfering with the behavior of individuals or forcing them, said Talib Abu Shar, the Saudi-educated, giant shock, Hamas minister of endowments and religious affairs. Quote, it doesn't mean we are going to impose Islamic Sharia law on the community. We don't want to be like the Taliban in Gaza. 14 years later, guess what? This education campaign is called Fadila, or Virtue, and in part consists of posters distributed across the city. Some advise young people against smoking or taking drugs. Others warn against internet pornography or satellite television. Quote, be careful, watching dirty channels corrupts the family and the coming generation. That particular poster lists recommended channels. All are religious and Islamic. Mostly the campaigns focuses on what women wear. One startling poster decries the trend for young women to wear their headscarf along with tight jeans as a satanic industry 100%. It shows a red devil holding an image of a fashionable young woman and recommends a fuller, less glamorous head covering, counseling, the right hijab is your way to heaven. Asked about his attitude to those few Gazan women who do not cover their hair, Abu Shar said, we tell them it is an essential element to being a Muslim. Wearing the headscarf is as essential as prayer. You see, I hear a lot of folks in this country, talk about separation of church and state, and the vast majority of them are all over on the left. And they are all anti-Israel. And they are all pro-Palestine. There are not roving bands of Jews in Palestine making people adhere to the laws of Judaism. But there are, and we have pictures of, roving bands, right here, of Islamists yelling at people on the beach, castigating women for not wearing headscarves, saying they're going to hell if they don't, and that it's part of that religion, and that the country is Islamist. Can anybody explain this? How this is somehow Israel's fault? Perhaps the greatest surprise of the campaign is the resistance it has generated. Although Gaza is socially conservative, many Palestinians object to be commanded to follow a particular social code. When the Hamas-appointed Chief Justice, Abdel Rauf al-Halabi, ordered a new uniform for all lawyers, which for women meant a headscarf and a hijab and a jilbab, whatever that is, a full-length robe, he had not counted on the temerity of the response. Nearly all of Gaza's 150 female lawyers already wear headscarves, but they challenged the ruling on the grounds that it had no basis in law. Now, 14 years ago, the Chief Justice was forced to back down. Not now. Not now. You see, this is the point. The Hamas campaign was not inevitable. Hamas is a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. Who else? Was there somebody else we knew? Muslim Brotherhood? Who else was it? Gosh, there was a God, man, who was it? Politics, some guy. I can't remember who it was that was in charge or associated with a broader Islamist movement present in most Arab and Islamic countries, which generally believes in winning over supporters by encouragement and debate one mind at a time rather than imposing decrees from above. So, I'll let you read the rest of this. But this is from 14 years ago. This was this country 100 years ago. And it's the same thing. And it's the same idea. You see, you can make whatever allegation you want about what is modest, what isn't modest, what is appropriate, what isn't appropriate, what is all that. But it's not for the state to enforce, is it? It is not for the state to enforce. If I was with a female friend or whomever, we were at the beach, whatever she was wearing, some guy came up and started giving her shit, it'd be on. I'm telling you, right then and there, it would be on. I'd probably end up in jail. You just don't do it in a civilized society. You just don't do this in a civilized society. Live and let live. Live and let live. Like I said, you don't have to watch Florida Maki videos. Made no pretense about one of the best reasons to live in Florida if you're a guy. It's one of the most beautiful places that you can be. It's a wonderful place, but you have to have a sense of civility, a sense of decorum, a sense of esprit de corps. You can't go around harassing people, but it's a wonderful place to live, even this time of year. And, I use this analogy with Cuba. There was a thing called the Cuba Libre movement. And it was, who remembers the Spanish-American War and what it was about? See, the Spanish were kind of a declining power. We were a rising power around that time, right before the turn of the 20th century, the late 1800s. And for all intents and purposes, it was a cruiser, but it was pretty much a U.S. battleship. Blew up in the USS Maine, in the harbor, Havana. And that just set everything off. And we went to war with Spain. It was over in about 4 months. But there was a Pacific theater, an Atlantic theater, Caribbean theater, really. And it led to Cuba having its independence from Spain. So the U.S. fought for Cuban independence from Spain. But now, of course, as we know, things change. And you could have whatever opinion you like about Guantanamo or about the U.S., the Monroe Doctrine, the role of the United States in Latin America, the border, all of this. But whether it was Mexico or whether it was Guatemala or Cuba, a whole bunch of them get their nose bent out of shape and they come onto American soil and they do to us what Hamas, Palestine, just did to Israel. Oh my goodness. The Palestinians should be thanking their lucky stars that didn't happen here. Because had that happened here, had something like that, an equivalent attack like that happened here, that Cuba would be state number 52. We would absolutely destroy the government of Cuba. There would be it would be another U.S. state if they did if Cuba did an equivalent attack on Miami. They went to the Keys and they kidnapped people and they killed people and they did all this horrible crap over the blockade, over the Bay of Pigs or whatever that they didn't like. If they did, now I don't believe the Cubans ever would. I don't believe they ever would. They're just not wired that way. Because, well, they're descendants of Spanish, and the Spanish are Christians. And it's just not in them to do these things that Hamas does. And that's why you can't support Palestine. Because Palestine, see all these people at the beach? 70% of them voted for the guys on the horses. 70% of them voted for the guys on the horses 18 years ago. That's how popular Hamas was. And now you see what you get. So, I will leave it there. But ask yourself, if it were your daughter, if it were your granddaughter, if it were your niece, your sister, your wife, and some random holy roller came rambling up on the beach and started running their mouth at them because they were wearing this, that, or the other, they weren't wearing this, that, or the other, whatever. Believe me, Florida man, oh my goodness, I cannot imagine. I cannot imagine what the guys down here, I'm one of the more genteel ones, and I know what I would do. Some of the women down here would, now that I think about it, probably be, well, I should probably, even at 21 minutes, I probably can't say what I was going to say. So I will leave it there. God bless. You get my point. Pray for each other. Pray for me. I'll pray for you. Lift each other up. God bless. Like, share, subscribe. We'll see you guys next time.